Tom, I'll start with you if I can. I touched on this last night. This is a family that has had a number of their claims tested, rejected, appealed, rejected, all the way up to the High Court. I know there is sympathy in some quarters, a lot of opposition in others too. They've been told to go home. They're hoping, though, with a bit of media pressure, they might get the government to change their mind. What do you think?
Well, I think what's happened with this sudden evacuation of this 3-year-old to the Perth hospital, I think that has changed the political dynamics surrounding this, the exile of this family to Christmas Island. And it's been reported today that Liberal MPs, backbenchers, are seeking a solution that lets the family return to the mainland, to the Australian mainland. How long has it been? 2 years after punitive detention. So they're doing this privately, the Liberal backbenchers. They want to fix the problem as soon as possible. But at the same time, a settlement decision has to wait upon the courts. So this drama still has some ways to play out.
Oh, and of course, let me repeat, they're in detention because they were being deported. They had a court injunction to stop the deportation. And of course, when you stop a deportation like that, you end up in detention. So there we go. James, I've got to ask you more developments about the possible origins of COVID. A prominent researcher at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, we know her as Bat Lady, received hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of funding from Anthony Fauci's National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases to study bat coronaviruses. Now, this is a story in the Daily Telegraph today. Pressure mounting, do you think, on Fauci?
I think pressure's really mounting on Fauci, Peter, and I think it's really interesting how after Donald Trump left office, suddenly it's okay to start talking about the very thing which he said, which is that, you know, there's every possibility and, in fact, very good evidence that this thing did come from a lab, not that it was deliberately set upon the world, but that it was played with, engineered in a lab. There's all of this evidence now, though, that Anthony Fauci, his NIH, and through a group called EcoHealth, was actually funneling millions of dollars to this institute to mess around with and study coronaviruses. They say they didn't do any gain-of-function research with that funding, but you have to wonder how much oversight, how much control did they have of that money once it really went over there? And they put a pause on that very research to make the viruses more deadly to prevent exactly this sort of thing. So a lot of questions need to be answered, and a lot of those have to be answered by, I think, Dr. Fauci, who was treated as the hero of the pandemic because he opposed Trump, but now he may very well wind up being one of its villains.
I think that could be exactly what's happening here. Let's head to London. More horrific details have emerged. Systematic torture, forced sterilisation and organ harvesting of Uyghurs by Chinese authorities in Xinjiang. There's a tribunal, they're calling it the Uighur Tribunal in Britain, has heard some pretty horrific accounts firsthand. Tom, the world couldn't be more on notice about what's happening in Xinjiang. I mean, after the Second World War, we all swore, didn't we, as a collection of nations, that the Holocaust, that sort of genocide, wouldn't happen on our watch. Yet it's happening here in Xinjiang. Now, G7's in a matter of days. Surely this should be front and centre at the G7.
Well, it will be. Japan is raising it as an issue for a joint statement. Look, it's an appalling human rights abuse, no question about it. It's also important to recognise that what the Chinese are doing here represents a key part of, if you like, Beijing's new imperial policy. I mean, people don't know this, but Xinjiang only really became part of China in the mid-18th century, and China won't liberalise because its authoritarian leadership fears ethnic rebellion. So China has this political system closed, and at the same time, it's pushing into Central Asia through diplomacy, economic interventions. It's building vast infrastructure projects in the region to ally with the Turkic Muslims of the former Soviet Union. And as a result, they're denying Chinese Muslims a friendly near base for future rebellion. So this is all designed for China to exercise its imperial aggression. And that's precisely why the responsible leaders of the G7 leaders will put out a statement on China's treatment of its mostly Muslim minority in Xinjiang.
All right, we'll look carefully for that. It'll be highly worked over, as you know, with these sorts of communique documents, but we will pick it up and bring it to you here on Credlin. US Vice President Kamala Harris, James, been slammed for inaccurately claiming she's visited the Mexican border when she hasn't. It comes after 180,000 undocumented migrants have arrived at the border since April, the highest number, we're told, in 2 decades. Democrats are making a lot of mistakes. It actually reminds me a lot of the Labor Party, Australian Labor Party, on border protection, don't you think?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of parallels there, Peter, but I think also it's really interesting how, just as with the issue of where did that coronavirus come from, when Trump said it, you couldn't say it, but, now it's okay to say. And the same thing, the other day, Kamala Harris said, if you're thinking about coming to that border, please don't come. Now, of course, when Donald Trump said that, he was an alt-right, white nationalist, racist, and all that sort of horrible stuff. But now Kamala Harris says it, and it's like, oh, okay, that's fine, whatever, sure, fine. But, and then she goes, and then she says, oh, well, no, we've been to the border. And they say, but you haven't been to the border. And she actually said to this one reporter, but I haven't been to Europe either. And everybody's scratching their heads. What is going on with her? She has been given this task of running the border, but it's just, as you say, Peter, it's a disaster. And this is shaping up to be one of the many crises that I just don't think this administration, Peter, is able to competently handle.